I'd like to talk a little bit about the NMRA. I was told tonight, I don't know this to be fact right now, but this is what one of the modelers told me tonight. And that is that the NMRA is going to reduce significantly their online programs during the summertime from whatever they're doing now to once a month because they feel that their members are going to be on vacations and there's just, not enough interest. Well, I heard the same kind of thing for the last couple of years. This will be our third year by then. And we continue, we feel that we are not just for an NMRA show. We probably are at least half and half NMRA members that watch the show and non-members. So from my standpoint, as long as people are interested in the show and want to participate, I plan on continuing the shows on a twice a week basis for the rest of this year. And, if it's true that the NMRA is cutting back, I want to make sure that everybody understands that our shows are not going to cut back over the summer. And they will come on as advertised, hopefully twice a week as they are right now. So with that said, I really don't have anything else that I can fill in with tonight. I was really counting on David, David being here. But since he's not here, I'd like to close the show with some final comments and then go to the after show. Unfortunately, Clark Cooney isn't here for that, so I'll be running the after show too. So to end the show, please go to our website, newtracksmodeling.com, and subscribe to our website. You'll get an email back. If you'll answer the email, then you'll get emails for every show in the future that we do with the Zoom login links. The reason we can't send the login links out to everybody is because of hackers disrupting the show if we do that. So that's how you get the login links for the Zoom. To get notices of all of our YouTube live streams, if you'll subscribe to our New Tracks Modeling YouTube channel and click the bell, then you will receive advance notice 30 minutes before all of our live streaming on YouTube. So I hope you'll do both of those. If not both, I hope you'll do at least one. And with that, thank you so much for being here tonight. I'll try to get David rescheduled as soon as possible, and try to have him back on our show. So with that said, let's start the after show. And what would you all like to talk about? Well, that's interesting. Anybody else have a comment?
Yeah, this is John. This is John Mick. I was just going to make a comment. Clark was in Arizona. I saw him on Saturday. He came to our state meeting. He participated some in the judging of models and everything, and enjoyed seeing him. He knew a lot of people at the meeting, and it was good to see him and enjoyed talking with him.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's wonderful. I think he liked your organization down there. At least that's what I heard.
He's staying with his brother in Mesa, Arizona, and so he came over to the meeting. It was great.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. When's he coming back? Do you know?
He said he'd be another week or two before he comes back.
The 6th of April.
6th of April?
You can keep them.
Well, I heard there was a question whether Canada was going to open its doors again.
Good news is you can only stay half the year, or you lose your medical in Canada. So,
Yeah, well, he better head back before spring and summer hits Arizona.
Yeah, it was warm on Saturday, but cooled off. I was down there for a week and working at the museum, and then went to the state meeting. So it was fun.
I used to be in Arizona for a while, a long time ago, and they used to give the report, the weather report of it's so and so in the shade, and I kept looking for a tree, and I couldn't find one that gave any shade out there.
Where were you? There's plenty of trees.
Out in Phoenix.
Ah,
Yeah, well, down here in Green Valley, there's few and far between on trees.
Yeah.
So I'll show something that's interesting. We actually have been doing this for a while. I don't know if you guys can see that. So this is an O-scale car, and this is a 3D printed frame that goes inside, and it holds a GoPro session up at the front. And this is an angle head USB cable. So this battery will run the GoPro for 12 hours pretty easily. And we run it as a camera car and just use the output to an iPad. And we actually have glass walls, so we put it up behind so the kids can see basically a cab view. Some point we'll try to do it with using the cameras that they put on the drones, but that's a much bigger project. This is just kind of out of the box using the Wi-Fi across the layout. So it's kind of cool and begins to introduce this concept of cab video, which I think is going to be over the next 10 years, a pretty interesting part of the hobby.
I agree with you. I think so too.
But it's really interesting. The thing that's really interesting is to engage the kids in a conversation about what they see, because you can see the train, and if the train's going 1 mile an hour on the layout, when you look on the video screen, it appears to be going 48 miles an hour. And it's interesting to have a conversation about why can't you see that going as slow as it is? You see it's going slow. Why does it look fast here? And of course, the idea that the screen fools your brain into seeing what you've seen every time you drive in a car, and your brain immediately interprets that as speed. So even though you see it on a screen, you know it's not real. The minute you look at it, your brain tells you you're moving in a moving vehicle. It's kind of an interesting point about how the brain can be fooled.
Something else that I think is going to be important in the future for the hobby is remote operation. And we have a guy coming on the show, I think in 2 or 3 months, that has a switching layout that is able to be remotely operated. And as I understand it, it's not exactly what John Allen had for his time saver, but the concept is pretty much the same. And he can change, how cars are supposed to be placed and picked up and so forth for different operations. And I think it's really going to be interesting because we're going to open it up to modelers during the show to be able to operate remotely from their iPad or their cell phone on his switching layout. Now, there are other layouts that I've heard about that are operating railroads, but they're running railroads. They're really not meant for switching, from what I've been told. His is just totally a switching layout that's able to be operated remotely. So I hope that that'll be something that you all are interested in and want to participate with.
Phil, I got a
Hey, Jim.
suggestion for your camera thing. Cut out a little, like an outline of a, like you're looking out of the cab. Like the windows.
Yeah.
Like the divider, or like an F unit, like a.
Yeah. I
maybe-
think for the drone cameras, we're going to try something with this one. Actually, it's interesting. Kind of the next step is to 3D print a whole car, except for the trucks that carries the camera. And that'll be kind of an interesting thing to see. That was kind of a second effort. So yeah, no, that's an interesting thought. That's one of the thoughts of putting the drone cameras is you can actually mount them right up in the top of an F unit. In an O-scale F unit. So they're actually shooting. So you get that view through the F unit windows, which are kind of curved. I thought that would be cool. And the interesting thing is, it's not a huge step to take that video output, put it on a 21-inch monitor, a little station where a kid can sit down and then take the inputs basically to DCC in some way and wire them up to a button so you can make the engine go faster and slower. And you can take an engine and adjust the speed curve. So it would be pretty manageable to let kids actually control it. might be a really interesting thing. We do, we obviously are open for the public where the events at a fairgrounds in the Bay Area where we get, the fair gets 500,000 visitors and we'll get 50, 60,000 visitors during the fair. So engaging them is an interesting thought process.
Yeah, the other thing I would point out as far as I remember a guy who posted a video that he kind of the same idea, like he hooked up one of those and he had a very nicely detailed layout and it was like he was sort of driving toward the corner of the layout and the backdrop looked pretty normal, but then he went around the corner and all of a sudden he was going parallel to the sky. And it was a very disturbing view. It was like, because it looked so realistic when it started, and then all of a sudden you're looking at like you could see like the overhead, like the ceiling kind of thing, and it was like, whoa, what happened here? It was just weird. So
if you've
When-
never
when-
done it, buy a GoPro session and run it around your layout. As long as it's not N scale, they're small enough they'll go around an HO layout, and it is very instructive on your modeling.
We always wondered with our covered bridge, how much detail do you do inside the bridge? And I always thought, well, nobody's going to see it anyway, so why bother with the detail? And then a friend of mine on his layout, he had an onboard camera and it went through the covered bridge. And you could see every board and NBW going through it. So that made up our mind that it doesn't matter. You do the inside of the bridge just as good as the outside of the bridge. Actually, it's Canadian. Bruce Lucky. It was his layout that I saw that.
I think if you're building a layout with tunnels today, you have to rethink through your tunnel strategy.
Yes,
Because
that's why we have the tunnel liner.
right,
Exactly. In our tunnel liner, what's really neat about it, it's in the spiral tunnels in BC. And when you see the headlight coming through all the wood structure inside, it's really cool to watch that headlight come through, especially if it's on a curve. I just had a chat line here that brought back some memories. We've done shows for, 20, 25 years now. And Maureen's always building at the show. She's building one of our kits all the time. And somebody just come up with the phrase, the bridge lady. And we haven't heard that for a lot of years, but that was, everybody would say the bridge lady and they knew exactly who and where to go. It's like Clark. They always go to Maureen. They don't go to me.
I'd like to bring up that there is a military modeler. The guy is outstanding in weathering, and he does some videos on YouTube. And about once every 6 months, he'll do a railroad car video. And he just posted a new weathering of a 50-foot gondola. It's kind of a modern car, but it is well worth taking the time to view that video to pick up some good standard weathering techniques and to see the application of some of the military modelers' techniques to a railroad car. And the guy's name is Panzermeister 36. And it's a realistic HO scale gondola weathering. If you're interested in it, very much worth your time taking to pick up some good standard techniques in weathering that are from the military guys.
Yeah, I would have to say one thing I've noticed when you're doing a cab ride, camera and all that, that you actually have to turn around and actually do both sides of the buildings that you're building. You can't have it unscenic or a half building on the other side, because it'll become very obvious that it's it looks more like a Hollywood set than it does a actual railroad. And I think also with if you're doing something that is, using a camera, you might be able to do something more different and maybe condensing a railroad, because you can have a building or a bridge or a fence in between and all that. And you could have like a completely different scene on the other side. So you can make it more narrow railroad basically, because you're not seeing the whole scene, you're only seeing the view from the cab.
Boy, it's quiet out there. Don't everybody say something.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is Ron Waxman on? Is Ron
Huh?
Waxman on tonight?
Who?
Ron Waxman?
Yeah, Ron.
I don't know.
I'll
I do
check
not
it.
see it on.
Something.
Hey, Fred, wake up. You're muted.
Have we forgotten to ask somebody what's for dinner tonight?
We're gonna ask Fred why is he sleeping.
Video, I'm going to show you how I apply.
Good thing it was muted. We probably would have heard him snoring.
That's the question for Ted. What's for dinner?
What is for dinner?
Ted's muted.
He doesn't know yet.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, can I ask you a question about pastels?
Sure.
I went online to look at the different pastels. And what is the difference between, like there's the soft pastels you've been talking about and oil pastels? Stay away from oil pastels?
Yes, the oil pastels require turpentine to kind of melt the pastel binder, if you will. Really, the big difference between pastels and pigments is just that binder. And also pastels are tended to be a little bit of blends of a couple of different pigments to get the value that they are after, whereas pigments are just usually a straight pigment, not a blend. As far as the oil pastels go, I have not been successful in using oil pastels, particularly oil pastel pencils in modeling. I have seen some people make them work. I don't know how to do that. It does require some fairly strong things to melt the pastel binder, and they just, I just can't, I can't say enough about how they don't tend to evenly flow, I guess is the best way of putting it. You get real, almost like you were drawing with crayons, that textured, carpet look. They just don't go on smoothly at all.
They kind of
for
build up,
our
don't they, Chris?
applications. I'm sorry?
See, they build up a little bit on you when you use them.
Yeah, they will fill up the tooth of a paper or something a lot quicker. It's just I just have not found a use for them of any real value in our type of work. I've got a whole cigar box full of them that were passed down to me, but I've spent, I don't know, 15, 20 hours maybe trying to make them work, and I have not been able to make them work. And even going back and reading what professional oil artists, pastel artists use them for, and trying to modify some of those techniques, I can't get it to work. Whereas the pastels, soft pastels, once you learn the properties of the soft pastels between the different manufacturers, you can really play that to your advantage in weathering. So I don't know that that really answers the question fully, other than trying to encourage you to stay away from them unless you've really got somebody that you know personally that is very adept at in artwork and using them in something, who can walk you through it. But I've had 2 or 3 art pastels artists try to talk to me about them, and I haven't been able to work it. And I have spent probably about an hour to an hour and a half in discussions on oil pastels with one of the larger soft pastel manufacturers, Terry Ludwig, and about that whole subject. And I haven't been able to really identify a good way for us to utilize them.
Okay, thanks.
Can
very
I
much.
just add something to that?
Sure.
Yep.
Don't get chalks, which the pastels are, mixed up with pigment.
Right.
Pigments are paint pigment. And if you're doing any work on plastic, don't use turpentine. Use mineral spirits or artist spirits, but don't use turpentine or turpenoid.
Yeah, yeah. You might be able to get by with some Bestine too, which is a rubber cement product. You might be able to, depending on how you're using it. But I totally concur with that, with Ralph's analysis there.
Thank you.
Hey, Chris, I was talking to Bob Farquhar tonight. He got in contact with me with this paint issue. And I guess Bob had painted some parts, some telephone booth parts with an automotive stainless steel rattle can paint. And then he found he couldn't get anything to stick to that afterwards. So he couldn't get any glues to stick to the paint. Now those paints, I haven't seen it in rattle can paint. I've seen it in expensive aerospace or automotive paints, but there is paints that have actual real metals in them that when you spray them, they form a wax coating. So they add a waxing material to the enamel or to the paint. So it'll form a wax coating and nothing will stick to that. They do it with these metallic flakes so that they don't oxidize actually after you spray it onto something. So I think that's might have been what he ran into, but he tried about 17 different types of glue and couldn't get anything to stick to the paint. So we were chatting about that offline and I think we came up with that solution. So be careful out there if you use these chrome paints and these the automotive type rattle can chrome paints. The model paints seem to be okay, but some of those, like I say, I hadn't seen it in rattle can before, but I've seen it in some pretty high grade paints before. I guess it's making its way down to that level.
Yeah, for those of you that might be interested in the Saturday scratch building show, he showed a actual can of the material that he had sprayed the spray booths with, and he couldn't get any glues. And he tried everything from CA to PVCs to you name it to stick. It sounded almost like he had sprayed aluminum foil just on his phone booth there to get the silver color. So sounds like Daryl has a real good handle on it though with that wax coating. I've never run into that paint brand, so I don't know if it's something that was utilized or sold there in Canada specifically and not down here in the States. So, but I've never seen that brand.
It was a trem-clad stainless steel paint, I think he had. So it's stainless steel finish. So I suspect it had bits. Mind you, stainless wouldn't oxidize, but I'm sure they use aluminum or some other nickel material to get the color right. So
yeah, it was just real interesting because I've never heard of never being able to get any glues to work with it. I've heard of glues not holding for a length of time. You know, in some shows and stuff, some people have brought it up, but I've never heard of it falling apart. But like everybody else here, I've, you know, wandering through the shows, you can occasionally pick up a used model here or there where it's coming unglued at the seams and it was painted with some sort of a metallic type paint.
And my experience with CA cement is that it sticks to anything except the part you're working on.
Hey, it's designed for human figures, you know?
Yeah.
And of course, it works best on fingers.
Yeah, well, that's what it was designed for, wasn't it? I mean,
Yeah, it was designed for use in Nam as a corpsman, because that's where we came first in contact with it.
This is John Mick. Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Yeah, I've been working down at the Arizona State Capitol on the model railroad they're building down there. The latest issue of Model Railroad Hobbyists, the March issue, has an article in it that was written how they installed LCC down there. So you might take a look at that if you have any interest in it. There's a couple of great pictures of the layout they're building. So,
What's the layout of model of?
it's a model of all of Arizona. The state required they try to include all the high points and cities in Arizona. So in order to do that, it's 4 layers and they've got all the important sites. It's really the history, sort of the history of Arizona, all in one layout.
What time period?
It's really the 40s and 50s in that sort of time period.
Okay.
You know, so.
HO scale?
It's HO. They do have a couple of other smaller scales, but it's mostly HO.
Gotcha.
So I think there's a little bit of narrow gauge, a little bit of N gauge. It's 90% HO or more. And it's probably 2 more years. They've been working on it it was a 5-year schedule to build it, but they lost 1.5 years on COVID. So, but it's going to have
volunteers building it?
All volunteers. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're close to, I think it's close to $1 million using the dollars the state uses in volunteer labor. So anyway, I help them out with some of the electronic stuff. So it's been fun.
Yeah.
The good news on the project when I was down there, I got everything installed and working. So all 20 Arduinos now are all the boards I built and everything are installed and working. So kind of finished that project. Kind of fun.
That's great.
Do you know if they need any structures or any bridges?
They are in the process of building a lot of structures and putting LEDs in them and so forth. I don't know whether the bridges are finished or not. So, but they're working on all that stuff. You can contact the Arizona State Historical Society. And if you're interested in working with them in any way, shape or form.
Okay. I may have some stuff to donate if it fits in appropriately. So
they'd love it. Yeah, it's all HO. The museum is now open from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. So somebody's there all the time running trains. So they usually at least 2 to 5 people are there. And just as I say, they're still building, still working, but it's an interesting article if you want to take a look at it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So if you got stuff you want to donate, why, you could always email me or just, I can pass on what you got or whatever.
Yeah, I'll just go to the website and kind of take a look and see stuff. It's just that a lot of things that I tend to build on the side, I just give to layouts and stuff to the clubs, and the local one here is all N scale and I don't work in N scale.
The website is azrhs.com. There it is right there.
Got it. Thank you.
That picture right there is a model that was built on, by a volunteer, donated time, all donation. There's a picture of the layout. That's from some time back. I understand they put some new pictures up. I haven't had a time to go look.
This is a slide presentation, it looks like, that goes through a lot of the structure of the layout and what they're building.
Yep.
So if you go through this, it actually kind of shows you the levels of the layout and what's specifically there on each level and what they're doing.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, a lot of times, those type of places, museums and stuff, they need background models or something that they can utilize, and
yeah.
so.
The thought is that there will be probably several hundred models, and all the models, most all the models will have LEDs in them. And there'll be a 20-minute, 24-hour day, kind of like Miniature Wonderland. So all the buildings will be able to have LEDs that come on and off at different times. And you know, so that's the part I worked on. I did.
Okay.
Well, the plan is to have maybe as many as 1,600. Well, you can have any number of LEDs, but right now the thinking is there'll be about 1,600 different LEDs, all individually controlled. That's all I got.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the information. Anybody have anything else to share?
Well, it looks like Ted is back. So what is he having for dinner?
He's not answering you. Food.
Well, excellent choice.
Ted is back also. I would say 2 Fridays ago, I wound up visiting a local. I'm not quite sure what it's called, but it's preserved bill. Well, not just the building, but the whole area. It was the summer home of the Pullman Car Company's second president, and they actually have a. They wound up restoring a car. It wasn't part of the original setup because it was originally built in 1905, but they did get a hold of an 1880s Pullman Palace car, fully restored it, and then brought it onto the property. It's called the Sunbeam. It's, from what I understand, one of 6 that are left that were built completely out of wood. Apparently, after 1888, they wound up going to steel. The interesting thing is that they had it's actually sort of kind of covered with it's not really a building. It's almost like a I want to say like a it's sort of like a shed, but 3 of the walls are removed, so there's only like 1 wall, and then there's the posts and all that, and then there's a covered roof that is protecting it. And on the side that has the wall on it, there's actually a section that they did not replace, so you can actually see how the wood framing underneath the sheathing is, and how that is all, how the wood is connected, between the queen posts and everything. And the thing is that this second president of the Pullman Car Company is not as famous as George Pullman, the one who started it, but also he is also overshadowed by his more famous than George Pullman is this guy's father. The second president, his name is Robert Todd Lincoln.
Mm.
And yes, it's that Lincoln. Robert Todd was the only child of Abraham Lincoln that survived to adulthood. And apparently the property was in the family until 1975, and then the local people who were local turned around and got enough money to start a historical foundation to save the property as is. It's if you go there, prepare to walk. It's in Manchester Village, Vermont, if anyone is interested in going there. It's actually still a working farm. So they raise, I believe, sheep and alpacas. But even when it was actually originally designed to be a gentleman's farm, because that was something that I guess Robert Todd did as a hobby, was, farm.
You model that period, don't you?
Well, I modeled the 1870s, so that it would be when George Pullman was still in charge. The Pullman Car Company actually came out. It was around it was not quite after before the during the Civil War that the idea for cross-country travel came about. I think what had if I'm understanding the history, is that when the Transcontinental Railroad was finally put together, that's when George Pullman wound up capitalizing on that.
Mm.
Ed, are you able to go through the car?
Not now. I guess because I guess before the pandemic you were allowed to. My assumption is that once all the restrictions are lifted, you might be able to, because right now they only have staff on site. They have right now they have no volunteers. But there is a platform that's like right at window level, so you can see inside the car.
Oh, great.
And some of the I mean the upholstery and everything on the inside there is just like oh, excuse me, like it was when it was first put together in the 1800s and all that. And it also is not only showing the car itself, but also it has a sort of a display of how the porters actually, how they worked and lived in these cars while they were serving. This particular car actually had two porters on it. One was the cook, the other one was the server. And it's very interesting is that they only the porters only had like a very small section of the car to live in, but the rest of the car was for the guests. And apparently these cars were rented out sort of like a limousine is today, except that it had full catering, because of the chef that was on it.
I've been on a couple of presidents' cars, and the one that really struck me the most was the Florida East Coast car that was fully preserved. And the reason it was in such great shape too, the president at that time, being a smaller railroad, but he wanted to be like the other presidents of like the New York Central and the Pennsy. So it was a wooden car that was sheathed with steel to look like a steel car, updated, and that preserved it. And it was the most beautiful car with stained glass inside and just chandeliers, everything. It was magnificent. The fireplace that was in it was far nicer than the Pennsy, the one I've seen the Pennsy Railroad had. It had a more modern Art Deco interior, which didn't strike me as much as this one, which was more Victorian, luxury. So yeah, they're beautiful cars. So Mike, when that's open to the public, I'd like to get down and see that.
So
Thanks for sharing that.
we had a chance here, the local, our local division went to the Niles Canyon Railway, which is actually the Pacific Locomotive Association. And they ended up getting a location in Niles Canyon and have been working there now for, I guess, about 30 years. They run basically a tourist train in the canyon. So we went Niles Canyon. So I'm going to share some pictures. We actually got to go on a nice shop tour and kind of interesting. Let's see, am I sharing the right? I don't think I'm sharing the right screen. Hang on.
I think you were, Phil.
There, is that it? Okay, so this is, if you look down here, this gray is actually really interesting. Does anybody know what kind of a locomotive that is?
Diesel hydraulic.
It is a
Cross
diesel hydraulic.
Moffitt.
It's a cross Moffitt diesel hydraulic 4,000 horsepower locomotive. So apparently the SP and the Rio Grande were very upset at EMD in the early 60s because the EMD just was putting out these 1,500 horsepower repeatable F units. And to get a train over the Sierra to replace the old cab forwards of the big boys, you ended up needing 5 of those. So you had to put 15 engines on a train to get over the Sierras. And EMD, you know, they had plenty of buyers for what they were selling, so they were not interested in building more powerful engines. So they found that the Germans had built these to go in the Alps. And so they went and they bought these. They bought some number of them, 10 of them or so. They were 4,000 horsepower, 2 engines, but they were, as someone pointed out, not electric, diesel electric. They were diesel hydraulic locomotives. And apparently after they got over the shock of that, they actually had to have metric tools to maintain them, which was quite a shock in the 60s, as one can imagine. They realized that they were used to buying Chevrolets and they'd bought a BMW. Because apparently the German expectation was that there was this complete rigorous maintenance you did at the end of every run. And the Americans just weren't used to doing that. So this is the last one that's left of them. And they're actually restoring it. They're only going to restore 1 engine because kind of the comment was 2,000 horsepower for what they do is all they really need. But there's some other interesting things going on. Taking a tour like this is interesting. This is a 280 that they're restoring. This is actually the frame. And the wheel sets are up at the Railroad Museum and the State Railroad Museum up in Sacramento in their shops. This guy over here actually did a really interesting talk. He's their primary painter. And so the question is, how do you paint a freight car? And apparently the answer is quite carefully, because if you do it indoors, you really can't see what you're doing. If you do it outdoors, he said the overspray goes at least 300 to 500 yards downstream. So you have to be very careful where you paint it, or you have overspray on all these cars down the road. So that was kind of an interesting to see that. The one thing, the reason I kind of pulled these up is this is actually one of the original Yosemite Valley wood cars that was built, and this was the shelter they built to cover it. I'm just trying to protect this stuff so it doesn't rust away. Anyway, I thought it was a fun trip, and it was kind of fun to see some of those things and kind of the restoration that you only see if you're a volunteer. So.
Was that one of those division tours you were talking about?
Yeah, and you know, I have to say it's not hard to do. And the membership, we get 25 to 50 people. We did one to the Railroad Museum where we rode trains. I mean, it's really interesting to think about where can you go as a group. That's an interesting trip to go to. In this case, what we did is we went to a location, people drove, and then this was in the morning. We actually had lunch. They have a volunteer lunch, which we participated in, which was very good. And then we had a couple of layout tours set up in the afternoon that were where people could drive to them as they kind of drove back to where they would go home. So trying to get people to engage here post-COVID, kind of an interesting challenge in some parts of the country where a lot of people are still isolating themselves.
Hey, excuse me, this
Working.
just to get off topic for just a second, Jim Kello. This is Jim Murphy. I was very impressed with Rick and Maureen sending in their build along ahead of time. And I put a note in the chat. Could you tell me who to send the movie to avoid any last minute fumbling and trying to find stuff? If I've got somebody I can send that presentation to ahead of time and just say, hit it, boys, that would be most helpful and make for a smoother transition. So who should I send that video to?
Bill, what do you say?
Hey, Jim, I'm going to, after this, I'm going to set up a folder on our Google Drive that you'll be able to just load directly into it. So you don't have to send it to anyone. You'll just load it in there and you'll know it's loaded.
Oh,
And then
wow, that'd be great, because
yeah, so
I usually load it.
yeah,
Yeah,
it just hit me. We were talking or before this, and we're going to set it up that way. We'll just set up a public folder and it's something you can load something into, and then we can pull it out of there and put it in. We keep a folder up there where we keep all the videos for these in one location. We've kind of got it.
okay, so if I can't pull, and it's happened to me a number of times, I try to pull up the video or the PowerPoint and I get all bumbled up. Yeah, if I have a place that, so I will go on, can you post the link or how I would get
Yeah,
that?
I'll put it up. I'll put it up there.
Put it up in the
Exactly.
chat there, okay,
Yep.
so I can find the Google Drive. Okay,
Yep.
hey, that's terrific then.
Super.
So it'll be
Jim?
there before next week.
Hey, Jim,
Jim?
how do you like that Nighthawk Cafe kit?
Oh, I am loving it. This is fabulous. I have put together a huge number of kits. I have yet to find a kit that fits together as nicely as this kit does. And I don't know if David Vaughn's on tonight or not, but I'm singing the praises of whoever laser cut that kit, because doggone it, you go to put a titchy window in the opening and it fits. First time, every time. I had primered some of the walls and I just barely had to take a piece of sandpaper just to take off the thickness of the paint. So those titchy windows and doors drop right in. It's beautiful. Challenging. Martin Breckbeal, I don't know if he's still on, built the O scale, and he did the review for O Scale magazine, and he had some challenges putting it together. And I learned from Martin's problems and I solved a couple of them, and I will mention those. It's working with that, basically the thinnest masonite you've ever run across. It's a resin impregnated fiberboard, very thin, beautiful to work with, easily modifiable, but rigid and waterproof. Well, that's a big plus. And I'm just having a ball putting this together. It's taken me a lot more time than I thought it was. So, but that's the way I like it. It gives you an opportunity to really do something with it. If you're patient with it, and I hope a number of people have been able to find. Now, there was a shortage there of the O scale versions, but I think Wit and Wisdom, David Young has been able to restock. David Vaughn, excuse me, has been able to restock on the O scale. So there should be plenty around for everybody, and it's a great model.
I hope that Wit and Wisdom does some other great models like that, because I've heard rave reviews from it before he even agreed to do the build along, and you committed to do the build along.
Yeah.
And to me, I think it's great that he's bringing back that kind of a model.
Yeah, well, his forte really is saving O scale layouts back in 2015, 2016. He got into great model railroads as the savior of big chunks of historic O scale layouts. And, he saved a bunch of, Armstrong's layout and a couple of others. And he's been able to, of course, he ended up digging out like a quarter mile of his basement. He's got a 90-foot long layout room in his basement. And I'm sure his house didn't start that big. So I kudos to him, to a man who creates the Ausable caverns underneath his house just to put layout in. So
And he's such an easy guy to deal with. He's a nice guy.
Oh, very, very nice. Fascinating individual. So,
yeah.
But anyway, we're looking forward to his presentation. He's going to probably take the first 10 minutes, and then I'm going to spend another 10 minutes just talking, singing praises of the model and its history, and then get into the build.
History is really amazing. I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy the history of it.
Yeah, it should be. It should be really a fun time. I don't know how many folks are out there but even if you haven't started to build a model, there's enough tips and tricks working with a historic model like this, and working in the medium of this laser board material, which I think is more and more of us are able to get into things like laser cut buildings. I mean, the brickwork and this building is beautiful. It's all laser cut, individual bricks, and it's just beautiful to see. And he also has included some wonderful 3D printed castings, the 3D printing of the individuals sitting around that diner, and it's like Greenwich Village and late at night, the 1940s. It's he released this painting like 6 weeks after Pearl Harbor. It was February 1942. He released the painting, and you can just feel in the painting what the country was going through, and it's dark, and yet there's this little pillar of light coming from the diner, and it's just really very emotional. So it's a lot of fun building the model and getting to know the characters. Yeah.
That's great.
So Jim,
Yes,
it's
sir.
Rick Hunter here.
Yes, sir.
No, not that Jim, the other Jim.
Oh,
me, the
See,
the
the
Murph.
reason-
Yes, it's much
Murph.
much
The
easier.
Murph.
I go by Murph because everybody knows Jim. I'm the Murph.
The reason we did all this was, we live in the big city, but we live away out in the country, and we're the last on the lines, on the bell lines. We're the last ones, and the fellas from New Tracks did a lot of testing on our system, and they found out that we're at 4.12 Mbps or whatever they are, and the newest ones, the latest ones, are 500, and we're sitting at 4.12. and
So
we come
you're
across
2 tin cans and a string.
basically. So we come up with this idea that if we upload it, do a video, and then upload it to the New Tracks site in the library, then it comes across much better than what it did before.
I thought tonight was perfect.
And that's how this.
Oh yeah, and what I find when I was doing, when I do PowerPoints, I tend to ramble. Like somebody else I know that doesn't stick to the script, and I tend to run over. But if I'm disciplining myself by shooting through a series of photos in my directory, and I'm able to record it, I can go back and I said, I've spent too long on this. I can shorten this, rephrase that. And it's much easier to compose presentation on video. I happen to use one of the softwares that somebody in New Tracks turned me on to. I think it's called Animotica. And it's $7 for a lifetime subscription. So it's the best software investment I ever made. And it's just really easy to use for us amateurs and putting together a video, and it's an MP4 format, which is pretty easy to handle. And as long as you can drop it onto Google Drive, doesn't matter how darn big it is, and you can put together a pretty easy presentation. I kind of like it.
The other big downfall that we have is if we're watching an hour and a half movie, it usually takes us about 3 hours. You know, you get this little buffering going around and around and around, and then it shows another minute of it, then it goes round and around and around. It gets
Well,
very
I could say
aggravating.
that at least this one should be free of commercial interruptions. You
Yeah.
won't have to pause for the ads.
And one of the neat things about in doing the sessions that we did, when it comes time for drying of glue or drying of stain, you just hit pause, and 20 minutes later, you just hit pause again, and you're back on again. So you can do a lot of editing for drying time and so on. Like
Oh, that's a good
works
idea.
really good.
Yeah, that makes sense too. All righty. Well, we're inspirational, Rick. I think it sounds like that's the way to go. I'm satisfied with that.
And we classify ourselves as untechy.
Oh,
Hey, Rick, what's going to be your next new product?
We don't know. Like if some of you probably know that. Some of you probably know that my whole system crashed last fall, and we're still recouping some of the software, and like the hardware is gone. But it's all of our drawings are in AutoCAD, and we run very old versions of it, and we've lost a lot in the crash. And we're trying to regain it, but I can't tell you that right now. I don't know.
Anybody else have any announcements?
Well, I have a question for Rick. Do you have kits that, say you already bought a kit and you want like a second kit, but you don't need all the instructions and all that? Do you have that set up or no?
No, it's a whole nother kit. A lot of, like, if you follow us, what we do is we cut the drawing all up, and it's not one of those things you really save. So it's all sorts of little pieces here, there, and everywhere. And we find if you're going to do a second one, you probably want the new set of drawings to do that. I don't know. We just don't separate that.
All right, thank you.
So you started your kit?
No, I was waiting for the instructions for tonight.
Oh, okay. Well, you got a lot of homework to do.
Yes, I do.
The fellow I was looking for was Mike Warman.
He was here earlier. He was here earlier, I think.
Yeah, I know. I messed his first name up. Okay, I'm going to have to catch him sometime else.
Well, listen,
Gee, it's
Phil,
quiet without
why
Clark.
don't you stop the recording on YouTube of the after show, and then anybody who wants to continue can just continue.
Actually, Phil left.
He left, I'll get it. There you go.
There you go.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm going to leave you now, but you're welcome to stay.
A lot of us look tired.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jim.
Hey,
Oh,
Pat,
you guys. Yes, Chris, go ahead.
Are you going to be available this Saturday?
Oh, I think so.
Okay, so I'm going to try to get on about a half an hour beforehand.